Hello students, welcome to the science series. So today we're going to cover the 8th chapter, which is metallurgy from the science textbook. So what is metallurgy? So the exact definition of metallurgy, to be precise, is the extraction of the metals from their ores and their further purification to obtain the metal in the pure state. So it is called as metallurgy. So there are various ores like aluminium ore, bauxite ore, and we have to extract metals out of that ores and we have to purify them, and then only we get pure metals to use like gold, copper, silver, etc. So the first point in this chapter is the difference between metals and non-metals, and many a times it is asked in exams to differentiate between metals and non-metals for 5 marks. So here I have listed 10 points which are easy to remember to differentiate between the metals and non-metals. So I have written here bullet points, you can write in full sentences. So the first point regarding the differentiation is malleability. So metals are malleable and non-metals are brittle. So what is malleability? So malleability is the ability of metals to be drawn into thin sheets. We can hammer into the metals and make them into thin sheets, while we can't do with non-metals, so they are brittle. Non-metals such as chalk, it is brittle. It can be easily broken down into pieces. Okay. Then the second point is the metals are ductile while non-metals are non-ductile. You just have to remember these properties. Then you can write these properties automatically by adding non or adding negation. So the second property is ductility. So ductility is a property of metals by which they can be drawn into thin wires. So for example, copper as a metal, we can make copper wires. So it is the property of copper to be drawn into thin wire, and this is the property of metals only. Non-metals are non-ductile. They cannot be drawn into thin wires. Then the third property is metals are shiny or lustrous. They possess a kind of luster, but on the other hand, non-metals are non-lustrous. But here the exception is iodine. So there are many exceptions to these properties. These are generalized properties, but there are exceptions. No need to remember, but it is good if you remember the exceptions as well. So iodine is a non-metal which has shine. Okay. The fourth property is sonorous. So metals are sonorous. Sonority is the property by which metals can produce a sound when they are struck. So when in a bell we struck the bell, it produces a sound. So bell is made from a metal. So it possesses the property of sonority. While on the other hand, non-metals are non-sonorous. They do not produce any kind of sound when get struck. Then the fifth property is high melting point and boiling point. So metals generally have a high melting point and boiling point, and non-metals generally have a low melting point and boiling point. Then the next property is electropositivity. So electropositivity is nothing but the art of giving one electron or art of giving electrons. By giving electrons, metals become electropositive, and non-metals generally have the ability to accept electrons. So we have we know the orbit structure of the metals. So if there is one or two metals, the one or two electrons, metals generally have the ability to give it the electron to some other non-metal. So they give the electron and they become positive, hence they are called electropositive. While non-metals, they take the electron and hence they are more electronegative in nature. So this property of taking or accepting electrons from metal is called as electronegativity, and hence non-metals are electronegative. Then the seventh property is metals are good conductors of heat and electricity, while non-metals are bad or poor conductors of heat and electricity. But here is also some exception. The exception is sodium, potassium, etc., which are not good conductors of heat and electricity. Then the next property is metals are hard, while non-metals are not that hard. But we know that the diamond is the hardest substance. And what is diamond made up of? It is made up of carbon. Diamond is an allotrope of carbon, and carbon is a non-metal. So here the exception is diamond. Diamond is made from a non-metal, carbon, still it is hard. So you can remember for not hard. The exception is diamond because it is the hardest substance. Then the next property is the metals are solid at room temperature. Mostly all the metals are solid, but here also there is some exception. Mercury and gallium. So the symbol for mercury is Hg and gallium is Ga. So all the metals are solid at room temperature, but mercury and gallium are liquids. While non-metals are solid and gaseous at room temperature, but there is also some exception. Bromine. Bromine exists in liquid state at room temperature, but all the other non-metals exist in either solid or gaseous state. And in the 10th point, you can just give the examples of metals like gold, copper, silver, etc. And for non-metals, oxygen, sulfur, chlorine, iodine, etc. So these are the points of differentiation between metals and non-metals. And now further we will see the reactions which non-metals undergo and metals undergo with many gases and all. Okay, let's study the reactions that metals and non-metals undergo. So there are various types of reactions that metals and non-metal undergo with different elements like water, oxygen, acids, dilute acids, and so on. So we'll study them one by one. So first is the reaction of metals with oxygen. So metals react easily with oxygen to form their respective oxides. So for example, here I have taken sodium. It reacts with oxygen to form sodium oxide. So you can see that this reaction is balanced. I have added 4 Na here because Na 2 into 2 is 4. So we must always see that the chemical equation is balanced and we have to add coefficients accordingly. So the next reaction is with water. So calcium reacts with water to form calcium hydroxide and H2 is evolved. So this arrow indicates that a gas is formed at the end. So here in this reaction with water, hydrogen gas is formed. Then the next reaction is with acids. So metals also easily react with concentrated acids. So HCl is a very concentrated acid. So magnesium reacts with hydrogen chloride acid to form magnesium chloride, and here also the hydrogen gas is liberated. Then the reaction with HNO3. So HNO3 is also concentrated nitric acid. So copper with nitric acid, it reacts and it gives us copper nitrate plus nitrogen dioxide along with water. So whenever a metal reacts with nitric acid, it gives the specific metal nitrate plus it gives nitrogen oxide and water along with the final product. So when metals react with non-metals, so sodium is a metal and chlorine is a halogen, non-metal. So it gives us common salt. When sodium and chlorine react, it gives us sodium chloride, which is the everyday salt we use. Then coming to the reactions of non-metals. So non-metals react first with oxygen to form their respective dioxides. So sulfur reacts with oxygen and it undergoes combustion to form sulfur dioxide. In the same way, nitrogen reacts with oxygen, it forms nitrogen dioxide. Carbon reacts with oxygen and in combustion it forms carbon dioxide. So non-metals react with oxygen to form their respective dioxides. Then the reaction of non-metals with water, that is H2O. So the chlorine, which is halogen, it reacts with water to form hypochlorous acid plus HCl. So non-metals do not easily react with water, but only the exception here is halogens only react with water. So here it is the exception that only halogens, chlorine, bromine, iodine, they react with water. So the third reaction is the reaction with dilute acids. So here also exception, non-metals don't react with dilute acids but halogens react. So chlorine reacts with hydrogen bromide to form hydrogen chloride and the bromine is given out. Then the reaction with hydrogen. So non-metals usually react with hydrogen to form hydrogen sulfide. So sulfur reacts with hydrogen and the final product is hydrogen sulfide. So these were the reactions of metals and non-metals with various elements, and that's it for today's class. Thank you.